When I grew up, I only knew a few bookies. They inhabited a stark rail between the members' enclosure and a racetrack, something known strangely as tats, and the rail. This was a fairly tight-knit community which included 2 to 3 fellas standing on boxes, waving white cards about. Those were the Tic Tacs, and they went by the names of Mickey Fingers, Rocky, and the Doc. Business flowed between the bookmakers freely, often using runners or the Tic Tac men themselves. Crowds were huge at the largest meetings, and cash, of course, was king. Few bookies on the rails, which included my father, turned down a wager of any size. That may not have been as true in the main ring in the Tattersalls, as it was known, where the smaller bookmakers might have resided. However, in those days, there was no betting exchanges. Bookies would often drink with their punters, be it coffee or better. There was little, if no, antagonism. Punters would refer to their favourite bookie as a legend quite often. They just wanted a bet, and the bookies were there to serve them. The businesses even paid out with a smile. It was all very personal. Now, I've read the rise of bookmakers like Denise Coates. I fully understand she has built a betting empire which serves the majority of its customers without incidents. I view such firms pretty much in the same way. The small recreational customer gets their bet on with a faceless entity. The odds are competitive, and very often you get to watch your event via a helpful live streaming link. When it goes like that, I understand why many have no issues with companies like Bet365, regardless of the impersonal nature of the relationship. If Denise Coates passed people in Waitrose dripping in diamonds, nobody would know who she was. It's when things go wrong that the antipathy so very often goes to the fore. I understand why people bet with 365 or shop with Amazon. The platforms make placement of the orders so very easy. Practically, though, the deliverance of good customer service has to be sidelined. With long queues on phones, the standard for large companies claiming millions of customers. Something that goes totally unpunished, of course, by the regulator. There's no phone number for Bet365. They seem to rely on an arduous live chat service, and we all know how long that takes. Forget your second girlfriend's date of birth, and you get cut off. In its infancy, firms like 365 were more famous for the bets they didn't lay than those they did. They were the pioneers of restrictions. The beggar bet culture was born. Coates, Topping, Hornby, Flint, Jackson, all CEOs of major gambling companies became more famous for what they did not lay than what they did. Bookmaking became a game of numbers, ruled by accountants, small numbers. There's little risk, my friends, in £5 bets. I, as a gambling operator, would love if every bet I took was just £5 from thousands, even millions of consumers. It represents no risk. Why? Because nobody is going to study form, sign up to expensive trading software, or the like, just to get a £5 bet on. It was a race to the bottom between the large concerns to distance themselves from traditional bookmaking values. Punters, for their part, wearily signed up to more and more accounts. Most informed gamblers don't wager with 365 or Sky Bet. They simply cannot get on, hence the growth of associated accounts. They put up more and more illegal requests for their data. The regulator, the United Kingdom Gambling Commission, has jumped on the bandwagon, enforcing entirely illegal gambling checks. Oh yes, they know this is patently against the Information Commissioner's Office and the regulations governing personal privacy. However, they reasoned that if a punter will sign up for multiple accounts just to get a £100 bet on, why would they not therefore be prepared to share their data just to get a bet? And the Gambling Commission was right. Punters just wanting a bet dutifully handed over their bank statements, whilst the big betting companies profited by the mass collection of consumer data they never had a chance to view before. The Gambling Commission has presented them with an open goal to profile consumers as never before. It has become literally a feeding frenzy, my friends. with the punters at the bottom of the customer relations pile, their right to bet marginalised and their data hijacked. Any perusal of privacy agreements from companies like Flutter, Bet365 or Entain reveal that they actively share the data you provide with a number of agencies. There's a huge amount of previously unavailable financial profiling going on right now. It would be naive of anyone to think this is used primarily to filter out a tiny element of the 30 million who gamble every year of problem gamblers. The information is being proactively utilized and shared amongst group members, for example, Betfair share with Paddy Power and back and forward, to filter out the winners. The opportunity to profit from vast amounts of confidential data has never been presented so easily. Importantly, it is in the absence of primary legislation necessary to make all of this collection of data legal. I have watched personally with utter dismay as the relations between betting companies and their customers has deteriorated to an all-time low. Something I would point out goes unchecked by the regulator. They place no importance on the kind of betting laid to lose minimum which was commonplace in on-course markets, racecourse markets. I suppose trading standards might be interested, but I've heard only of punters whining about it, not where they've actually bothered to take their cases to the standards agency. So punters are equally culpable here in not defending their right to get a bet. Typically, of course, racing folk have been either too late or indifferent to see the threat to their income streams of affordability checks. They've simply been too damn snobbish to open their mouths, ITV too woke a television partner to say anything. The regulator, the Gambling Commission, is fully aware of privacy agreements and exactly what the breadth of those agreements entail. They have given tacit assent for unfair commercial tactics and the closure of unprofitable accounts, provided their ideal of reducing problem gambling is achieved. Of course, it cannot be just up to regulators to insist on improved service levels from gambling companies. Consumers all too often ignore all the ills of doing business with the likes of Sky Bet, provided they get their bet on. Such attitudes have to change if the legitimate complaints about the behavior of such as Sky Bet die at the altar of Twitter as people sign up for their free bet and moan about what they can't get on. I don't expect big betting to mend its ways, although there are green shoots of progress on the responsible gambling front, mainly due to messaging. It will not only will this continue to remorselessly limit those that win from them, its mass collection of data can only lead to an environment where they profit from algorithms designed to filter out the unprofitable customers even more. Fines pile up on these large gambling companies, dished out with enthusiasm by a gambling commission looking to be seen to be relevant. It is incredibly frustrating to see the likes of Sky Bet repeat the same callous mistake, such as contacting excluded customers and yet retain a license to trade. It really is pointless giving organisations who trouser £400 million a year in profit a £1 million fine. The benefits clearly outweigh the negatives. I forecast no change in the attitudes of big companies. Their indifference to customer service standards, the failure to uphold prices they offer to those they know likely to best them financially. It is with consumers, the punters themselves, where change has to take place. I read constantly the complaints of those so casually binned by big betting as clients, as they find their wages restricted to pennies instead of organising themselves to support those firms that behave better and do lay a bet. They band up with non-gamblers to open up ghost accounts by the thousands. In doing so, you encourage the big betting companies to behave in exactly the way they please. Nothing you do affects their bottom line. On the sidelines to all this poor behaviour, a new breed of anti-gambling lobbyists gleefully watching as the industry lurches from one commission fine to the next, as it sidelines customer relations, basic values. Libertarians like Ian Duncan Smith actively seeking to ban gambling, coining phrases like gambling represents a pernicious addiction, that gambling represents a threat to our communities with a strong connection to social problems. Such views are nothing other than extremism from a former government minister. That's where we have arrived. With such radical views from somebody who claims to stand for individual freedoms and choice, Duncan Smith has allied himself with zealots from the Labour Party like Carolyn Harris. She of the maximum deposit level of just £3 a day. That's what she advocates. State control of your spend, indeed your life. Freedom dying on the altar of moralising MPs. These so-called leaders pressing the emotive button with entirely false claims on levels of suicides related to gambling and problem gambling children levels. Wholly unsubstantiated lies used to keep the virtuous from questioning their claims. Of course, the same anti-gambling MPs are silent on alcohol, a huge killer, an addiction that hospitalises half a million Brits a year. Why? Because, like the rest of us, they like a drink, and therein lies their deep hypocrisy. They oppose something because they don't partake in it personally, i.e., they don't gamble, and they believe we should all follow their lead. Let's return the debate to a grip on reality. The UK actually has one of the world's lowest levels of problem gambling, just 3.3% of the community, a tiny number. You'd be right to wonder at all the hiatus that's going on a daily basis on Twitter, on BBC, on Sky, all of these platforms yelling and screaming that gambling is bad for us. Lots of people, in fact, gamble as a hobby, a pastime, and they thoroughly enjoy their gambling. It brings meaning to the lowest level of sport when you've had a bet. The estimate of UK gamblers is 30 million people. Nearly half the nation enjoys a flutter without jumping off a bridge, losing their house, or turning into a dribbling fool. They actually enjoy gambling, and why not? The reality of life is humans need release from their daily lives, from the stresses of their life. Many of the addictions they choose involve harm on one level or another. Food, drink, smoking, shopping, gambling will always capture a few people who cannot cope with their excesses. They enjoy it too much. It becomes a problem. Are we to ban all of these products? Because in a cashless world, we are a heartbeat away from the Caroline Harrises of this world telling us what we can shop for at a supermarket and governing that by refusing to pay for such items at the till because you no longer have cash, you have to use a card, and they can govern what you spend. We are, in fact, mostly in control of our lives. I fail to see why gambling has been singled out as such a social pariah, except to say that it is the one industry where those that oppose it don't personally gamble. Therein lies the explanation for their opposition. Holier than thous, preaching to an entire community of responsible gamblers that they need to share their entire financial worth with some twerp working for Coral in Gibraltar. Little wonder so many people sign up for the black market, with betting companies restricting people by the tens of thousands and the do-gooders arguing for state control of our lives to satisfy their sense of self-worth. I appreciate these people don't worry about the unregulated market, They're only interested in a win at 90 minutes. What happens in the league afterwards doesn't tax their minds. But the black market represents an existential threat to humans. Absolutely no control on how folk manage their gambling. No taxation for the state, by the way. No responsible gambling assistance. maximum spin rates, credit card betting, everything the regulated market tries to defend from. It's important for gambling companies themselves to do two things. One, to lay a bloody bet to everyone is paramount. I've always advocated a lay to lose minimum of £100 at the available price to every customer on your books, and every gambling company should respect that ideal. They should also respect totally the data that they are presented with by their consumers and not share it with any third party or business partner. Gambling companies need to clean up their act if they are not to become the easy target for the Ian Duncan Smiths of this world, chasing down a vote and a little profile enhancement. It's also equally important for the Gambling Commission to focus more of its energies on the rights of gamblers and not just what appears to be a single-minded, myopic, blinkered focus on problem gambling. All too often, the regulator fails basic consumer values. Why does a customer seeing a price have his wager chopped to just £1 or even less? Isn't there a basic trading standard issue here that the regulator should be involved with? And finally, a message for those of you in the anti-gambling lobby. Even if there are some of you whose ideals are entirely genuine, who do worry about other folk, you have to allow customers their right to choose, their right to spend their hard-earned cash precisely as they see fit, to accept that most of what we spend our money on these days can be construed as damaging to someone. Somebody is always going to object to how people spend their money. End the virtual practice of governance of the lives of others and leave choice in the hands of the people. That's where it belongs. So there's my little penny piece on the world of gambling these days. Good luck with your decision, Mr. Government Minister.